Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my continuing series where I break down the albums that shaped me musically. I know it's been a little bit since I have done an episode in this series. I was debating on, when I wanted to do this album, and I didn't want to do it so close to Full Moon Fever just because this is an album, that's massive, and I was trying to maybe do a couple of albums in between that weren't as popular just to kind of, keep interest going. But I said, you know what, forget it, because this album, it helped with, moving on to different music once I discovered this album in its entirety. And as you can tell by the thumbnail, um, that's the album. You know, the album's so cool it doesn't have a title on it. Of course, it's Abbey Road, the Beatles' last recorded record. Came out in 1969. Of course, they would put out Let It Be the following year, 1970. But this is officially, in my opinion, the Beatles' goodbye. This is the Beatles' last effort as a group before they disbanded the following year, and it is my second favorite album of all time. If you've watched my series on my 100 favorite albums, you know that. And if you haven't watched that series, go back and watch it because it is riveting. You'll be on the edge of your seat waiting to get to number 2 of my list. So, when did I discover Abbey Road? Well, it would have been the year 2009. So, again, I'm a freshman in college. A freshman in high school. By this point, I'd already experienced the Traveling Wilburys. And again, I'm kind of building off of that Traveling Wilburys, you know, family tree of artists associated with the Traveling Wilburys. So, obviously, I talked about Oh Mercy with Bob Dylan. I've talked about, the Beatles #1. Which, come to think of it, that's the last album that I did. But anyway, whatever. I've done the Beatles one, and I've also done Full Moon Fever. So again, I've already talked about the Beatles. I was already familiar with the Abbey Road songs on that compilation. Come Together. I think Something is on there as well. Let's see. Yeah, Something. So I had Come Together and Something on there. And again, I also, I knew Here Comes the Sun also. But other than that, I didn't really know much on here. And, I'm starting to get in the Traveling Wilburys. I know who George Harrison is as an outside artist from the Beatles. So, I'm going back to that music. I'm investigating more into Tom Petty, into Bob Dylan. And then something happens. It's the introduction of a brand new video game, and it's got us all on the edge of our seats, those of my generation, and that would be the Beatles Rock Band. Now, if you don't know what Rock Band is, it's a lot like the video game Guitar Hero, just a different brand, where you have these video game controlled instruments. You've got a guitar, you got drums, you can do vocals, and the guitar can also be a bass depending on what mode you choose in the game. And I'm not a guy that plays video games. I never really cared for video games. I was always more interested in listening or playing music, and video games never grabbed me. There was a phase where I played a little bit, but it didn't really follow me into my adulthood. But anyway, Beatles Rock Band came out. I thought it looked so cool because they had the animation of all the Beatles throughout the whole stage of their career, from the Cavern Club up until the rooftop concert, and it was just catching my eye. And also at this time, it was announced that George Martin was overseeing the remastering of the Beatles classic catalog. So that would be all the Beatles studio albums, including Yellow Submarine, as well as the Past Masters 2 CD set. So it was Beatlemania in 2009, and it was the perfect time in my life for this to happen. So before I do anything, I get the Beatles Rock Band, I believe, for Christmas. And so it's sitting there, Christmas morning under the tree, and I'm just in awe, like, oh, I've got Beatles Rock Band to connect to my Xbox. And so at that time, my Xbox, we connected it downstairs in our finished basement of my parents' house. And I remember coming back from school every day and going downstairs and playing Beatles Rock Band. And again, I would start playing the songs that I knew. So I was playing, Here Comes the Sun was on there, Something, Come Together, in terms of the songs from this album. Um, and then they also had, I believe, Octopus's Garden was on there as well, which again I wasn't as familiar with. And so I'm playing these songs, and I'm starting to get into the deeper cuts of the Beatles that weren't on the Beatles One compilation. So songs like Andrew Bird Can Sing from Revolver, I Saw Her Standing There from Please Please Me, While My Guitar Gently Weeps from the White Album. I'm getting all these songs that I was not listening to. They weren't on the radio, and so that was about the extent of the depth of my musical knowledge, was whatever was on the radio, or Traveling Wilburys Volumes 1 and 3. That's what I was listening to. And also Full Moon Fever coming into the picture as well. So I'm branching out, but I'm not in depth. And so I'm hearing all these songs, and I'm like, man, this is good. This is good. Oh, this is another good one. This is a great one. Then, to see the Beatles on the screen as these animated characters playing the songs, with like psychedelic imagery behind them, and they're playing live like at Shea Stadium. We're on the rooftop, and I'm like, I've got to get into some Beatles albums. So the very first Beatles album that I purchased in terms of a studio album was this one right here. Almost 90% of the reason being this cover and how iconic this cover was. I listened to it, and again, I don't remember. I know a lot of people, they can remember the first time that they saw this movie, or the first time that they heard Like a Rolling Stone by Bob Dylan on the radio. I'm not very good with that because of, I guess, my generation, in terms of everything is just thrown at you all at once, whether it's in a commercial, ads on the computer, the radio is just boom, 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 the same format. So you're kind of just numb to it. But this is one of the few albums that I remember the first time that I heard it. I was sitting in my bedroom, my mom and dad's house, and I was sitting in my room. The door was shut. And it starts with doom 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 bam bam, with that come together, and it sounds good. And this remaster, you can really hear how it's been upped, and the bass. John Lennon sounds so killer on it with that distortion in his voice. And then it goes into something. So like I'm 2 for 2. I know these songs. Oh yeah, that's something so good. Bow, bow, no, bow, bow. George Harrison just kills it. So it's, a 1-2 punch, as we all know, with this album. Then it gets into the weird, Maxwell Silver Hammer with, Joan was quizzical, study met. Like, it's like, okay, that's different. And then we get to Oh Darling. And when I heard Oh Darling, I was like, man, that is some killer singing. It had the retro feel of the 50s kind of Motown, like that doom 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 doom. It's got that doo-wop feel. It's got the Motown feel. Paul is just shredding his voice a lot like John did on Twist and Shout on their first record. And so I'm like, wow, I've never heard Paul sound so cool. Hearing that song. And then you get into the bluesy I Want You, She's So Heavy, which I also knew from Rock Band. And that's still not one of my favorite songs, I think, just because of the heaviness of it, and just how, just the length maybe. Not a lot of lyrical depth, and I'm a lyric guy to an extent. And so then you hear that, and all of a sudden that cutoff was just like, whoa, where's that from? And then you get Here Comes the Sun, classic. We all know it. I knew it, as a little kid. And then Because hits, and I'm like, wow, that is just gorgeous harmony. Just, it's like a choir, just because they've triple, quadruple tracked their voices of John, Paul, and George doing these 3-part harmonies over and over and over and over again. Just killer. And then you hit You Never Give Me Your Money, which, is cool because it's one of those like little mini suites where Paul goes into the out of college, money spent. And so, I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. But stay tuned. Then we get to Sun King, which was very, weird, with like the kind of like the alt French vocalizations of the lyrics. And then the song Mean Mr. Mustard, which I'd heard that title as a little kid and always thought it was just wacky. Mean Mr. Mustard, what does that mean? And then it starts, from Sun King, we get Mean Mr. Mustard, and then it goes straight into Polythene Pam. Now, I'd never listened to an album before where one song went into another one that I could remember. And that was just like, they can do that? Like, you can do that on an album? you can put songs, that are listed separately, but put them together and they merge and make this one beautiful piece without sounding at all the same. And so I'm like, what is happening here? So we get Me, Mr. Mustard into the, Polythene Pam. You should see Polythene Pam. Bow, bow, like just killer. And then, oh, look out. Boom. She came in through. I'm like, oh, they're doing it again with She Came In Through the Bathroom Window. Just, my mind was just blown. And then with She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, they go into a reprise of You Never Give Me Your Money, which I was like hearing it, and I remember this specifically. I remember hearing the refrain, or like the same melody of, I never give you my pillow. And it's just like, that's this different song, but they're pulling from the other song to wrap it up as a theme. And I mean, when I heard that, I remember saying out loud, wow. Like, I was like, whoa, that is good. And, this is like 14-year-old Sam doing this here. And then, that ends. And then we get into the epic closing of Golden Slumbers, Carry That Weight, and the end. And just, again, Paul with that deep, I call it his fat voice, where he's like, Golden Slumbers, like that, his Lady Madonna voice, it's his fat voice. And again, boom, 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 they all connect. Carry That Weight is just like, an interlude between Golden Slumbers and, the end. Carry that weight a long time. And it's just, killer. Then we get to the end, and it is, it's Ringo at his finest, hitting that solo. I didn't know till later of the triple guitar swap that it was John, Paul, and George all going around doing that. Completely blew my mind. How heavy that song was. I mean, that sounds nothing like She Loves You. And again, Paul with that killer vocal of, oh yeah, all right. It's just killer. And I did misspeak. I was thinking as I was telling that story, the You Never Give Me Your Money comes back during Carry That Weight. So I apologize for that. Those of y'all that turned it off after that, I apologize. Don't come at me. And then, I can see on this track listing, there's a song called Her Majesty. But the end ends, and I'm like, is this song coming? And you wait, and it's like, what is it, like 23 seconds that you wait between the end, and then you hear, doing Her Majesty's. And I just thought that was just so cool. It was like a little tag at the end where, we'd have one more little tease, of the Beatles. Because they'd already ended the album with the end, but then they come out with Her Majesty just to kind of say, gotcha, it's not over. Which is very cheeky. And of course, learning later on that, Her Majesty was supposed to go into the original sequencing of songs during the side 2, suite, if you will. So that was just so cool. And so, Abbey Road means so much to me because, again, I remember hearing it for the first time. I remember it being the first album I bought after getting the Beatles Rock Band. And I also remember one Christmas that I received a Crosley turntable, and this was sitting beside it. So this is also my first real piece of vinyl. This was the 2009 reissue, which is cool because it doesn't list Her Majesty on the back. So it's the true hidden track of it. So that was really cool to have that. I think the following Christmas, or a couple Christmases later, when I received my Crosley suitcase turntable. And I spun Abbey Road a lot and just thought it was so cool that I was spinning vinyl, before I was even collecting vinyl of any kind. So then flash forward to January of 2016, and, I was able to go to London in college during a January interterm course. Went to London and Berlin for about 2.5 weeks between the two. And my friends and I were able to cross Abbey Road and so we got our picture taken, the touristy thing. And again, I've told this story a million times. It's, you can find it elsewhere where I talk about my Abbey Road story. But the picture that they took, that our other classmate took, myself, my cousin, and our two other friends, the four that were crossing the street, our feet were exactly in line with the Beatles, including, the offset footsteps of McCartney. So my buddy, who was doing McCartney, well, he was in the McCartney position. He was leading with the opposite foot. So it was a perfect capture, as close as we could get to the capture without standing in the middle of the road. And I've got it hanging on a canvas here in my apartment. It's a treasured memory. And I remember specifically, riding back to our hotel, and we were on the tube, the subway, and my buddy looked at me and he said, well, he saw me because I was sitting there like just like speechless, that I crossed Abbey Road, that I'd seen, Apple Studios, Abbey Road Studios, EMI Studios, and that I was, I was standing up holding on to the, to the bar, and I was just shaking my head like, I can't believe I just crossed Abbey Road, and got the picture to prove it. And of course, in that time, the Beatles became my favorite group. I've seen Paul McCartney twice. Both times he's done the Golden Slumbers medley to close the show. And it's always just a pleasure to see McCartney do that, to keep that up and to not break away the three songs. He also did, when I saw him, he also did You Never Give Me Your Money. And he did She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, which was, again, awesome to see him do that. It's something I'll never forget, just when I saw him do that with my sister back in May of 2022. So I could keep going. Abbey Road is just an absolute masterpiece. Production-wise, to me, it's probably the greatest album of all time. But I have one that I like a little bit more, which I may talk about later on. I'm not sure if I'm going to talk about it or not. But anyway, Abbey Road, it's perfect to me. It's absolutely perfect, and I will forever hold it close in my musical journey. So there you go. Sorry this one's a little bit long-winded, but I couldn't warrant cutting this down to like a 10-minute video. I couldn't do it. So let me know what you think. Again, sorry that this video series was on a little brief break. I had a few other videos I wanted to make. But let me know in the comments what you think of this album. Let me know what you think of the stories. Love the interaction. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And yeah, I appreciate y'all watching. So in the meantime, y'all be good. Take care. Talk to y'all real soon. Bye now.